right, guys, welcome back to the Fighter's Eye podcast. Today we have retired UFC lightweight Joe Solecki. How are you today, sir?
I'm doing good, man. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. My first question for you is, how did you find out about the MMA and the UFC scene, and what made you want to become a professional fighter?
Oh yeah, so I started training in jiu-jitsu kind of by accident in 1999, 2000, around that time. And
Mm-hmm.
I was only 6 years old, so the UFC really wasn't on my radar like that, or
Yeah.
anything like that. But as I got a little older, maybe 10 or 11, um, start to hear about that a little more. And then back then, it wasn't how it is now. There was no YouTube, there was no real access to it. So there was a couple magazines that had stuff about it in there, and Blockbuster had the special interest section, so it'd have like maybe a couple of animes, a couple of inappropriate videos, and then next to that was the UFC. So I remember being like 12 years old and renting one of the UFCs. That was my first exposure to actually seeing it live. Me and my brother. I think the first one I rented was like UFC 18 or 19 with
Oh,
Tito
wow.
Ortiz, and then
Yeah, yeah.
that had already passed. It was an older one. I think the one we were like current up to like the 40s. I think it was like
Okay.
UFC 46 or somewhere around that. And then after
Yeah,
that, it was
yeah.
like, man, I don't know. I'm not any good at jiu-jitsu at this point in time. I'm just a kid, but if I had my way, I would want to do that. And that was kind of ever since. It was kind of my obsession.
Yeah, because I mean, when you fight, it's mostly wrestling background with the jiu-jitsu. I mean, 62% of your wins come by submission. Do you have a favorite submission that you like to use in training or try to do in a fight?
Yeah, I think probably the rear naked choke is the one I use the most. I think it's one of the most practical for MMA. I love all the variations of a guillotine too. I think I had maybe just one in my whole career was the guillotine, but I was, in training, it's one of the ones I hit the most in jiu-jitsu matches. I
Yeah.
feel like I hit them a lot, but definitely the rear naked choke and anything from the front headlock. I love those style of submissions.
Yeah, and I mean, like, how did it help improving your overall game training at the gym, training with the likes of Brian Barberino, Brandon Holmes, Scott Holtzman, uh, Paul Carson, Josh Gillum, and all those type of guys, all those up and comers. Like, how did that help you improve your game, preparing for the fights?
Yes, so we met Jeff Jimmo, the owner of Jimmo, in a back room at a fight in Greenville, South Carolina, like almost 10 years ago, and
Mm-hmm.
I had heard of him and I had seen him at other fights and just didn't realize that's who it was. I just remember seeing a really good coach, really really good at warming up the fighters, and his pad work was unbelievable. And I just hadn't put the name with the person, and then that was kind of my first introduction to him, and we exchanged information. Eventually, ended up getting evacuated from where we live on the coast in Wilmington to go
Mm-hmm.
train in Charlotte, and ended up at his gym. And we went, and my buddy John Salter, who was, fought for the Bellator world title, he had gone the night before me because we were both out there evacuated from where we were living. And he's like, man, this is the best MMA practice I've been in my entire career, maybe. So I went the next day, and it was the same exact thing. It was just awesome. So from there on out, we would drive to train, one way. We would drive 4.5 hours to come train for
Oh,
like two
wow.
days. And
Oh,
then
wow.
after years of doing that, I would start staying in Jeff's house for like, during the week during my camp and just go home on weekends. And then eventually he was generous enough to offer me to come teach jujitsu there at night while I trained. So then me and the family moved about almost 2 years ago now, and have been, I was obviously training there the rest of my career full time,
Yeah.
and working there as well. So an absolute blessing. There's a lot of great fighters. Some of the ones you named are up and comers that are kind of after my time, right? Like they're training partners, now, but maybe weren't really fighting like that when I was there. So, or when I was on the come up there originally.
Yeah.
So back then it was myself and Salter would come, and we would train a lot with Barbarena, who you mentioned, and Scott Holtzman. Those were really my first introduction to like high level UFC athletes. We had
Mm-hmm.
Ricky Rainey was out of there as well. He was in the UFC. Impa Kasang and I was still there. There was a lot of guys at that time in big shows, and then there was a bunch of guys coming up. So you named like Paul Carson. He was wrestling at App State then, so like he was in the pipeline of visiting in summers and things like that. So it's just kind of a cool cycle of now. A lot of great talented guys are attracted there and keep coming to train. So Brandon Holmes trains at a different gym. He lives out of town as well. So he's actually full time at TNT Martial Arts in Columbia,
Oh, okay.
and great gym out there. It's like 90 minutes or almost 2 hours from us, and then he'll come up and train with us as well. So it's kind of become this hub where we have friends from all different areas and teams and stuff that want to come train. It's a really cool thing that Jeff's created.
Yeah, I mean, with like Scott Holtzman fighting someone like Mateus Gamrot, Brian Barberina's fought people like Robbie Lawler, Gerald Mearshart. So I mean, I think it's cool that you have the veterans like the Impa Kasanganay even who just followed me on Instagram randomly. I don't know why, but like Impa Kasanganay, Brian Barberina, and Scott Holman. And then you have the up and comers, like I said, Paul Carson, Josh Gillum, Brendan Holmes when he's there. So I feel like more gyms need to have the veterans and have the young guys so that the veterans can help the young guys and the young guys, can try to keep the veterans up to
Oh,
um
absolutely. It gives you something to chase when you're the up and comer, and when you're in that seat, you're in the big promotion. It gives you guys that are chasing you, to keep you honest.
yeah.
So maybe you want to pull back and do less than you did coming up, and you see these young, hungry guys, and there's no way you can, got to keep up with them. So I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah, and I mean, like with you, you just fought a young guy back in January in your retirement fight, Nurlio Alivev, some Dagestani dude. Um, like, what are your thoughts? Have you watched back the fight recently? Like, what was the game plan going in, and how did the fight play out different if it did?
Yeah, I mean, a super, dominant fighter. We knew it was going to be, very wrestling heavy. Like you
Mm-hmm.
name some of the guys who train with. We have good wrestlers at the gym, plenty of college wrestlers, and great grapplers. So, I didn't really have I had a full training camp 'cause I knew I would get a short notice call. So I was in perfect shape for a fight. The weight cut was great. We only had notice of him for like maybe a week or maybe 10 days.
Yeah,
So, you just shift the mindset but I had just fought Grant Dawson the fight before that, who's also a super dominant grappler. So it was kind of a continuation of that. We knew he was going to be, looking to get that takedown. I think the thing that he did different that I didn't really think he would do well was hide the takedown behind big strikes. So he wasn't the cleanest striker or the fastest, but he was throwing
mm-hmm.
very hard telegraph shots where you've either got to back up, or I mean, I could circle out too, but it was either putting all my weight to my back leg, like leaning too hard, or my hands coming up, and there's your takedown. So it took me 2 rounds of fighting off my back to where he was fatigued enough where I could stop the takedowns. And eventually in the third round, I took him. I was landing some good shots in the feet, and then took him
Yeah,
down and had him mounted. But it was too little, too late. So that was the only round I was able to win. Um, but kind of what we expected. We just had hoped to implement what happened in the third round a little sooner. And that's just fighting. And sometimes, he also has a game plan and good coaches and stuff too. So it's at the highest level. There's not a lot of room for error. So you shift your weight back too far one time, you end up on your butt. With a good guy like that, you may not get up. So
yeah,
it was a fun fight. It was enjoyable. I mean, obviously, I would like to have ended my career with a win. But the first 2 rounds were kind of not where I wanted to be, but that third round was a lot of fun. We were throwing hard shots. I got hurt. I think I hurt him a little bit too. Um, just one of those where you feel alive. You're letting it all kind of hang out. The first two were a little slower on the ground. That third round was a lot of fun.
yeah.
So, yeah, overall, good fight, good memory, and great experience.
Like, what do you think his ceiling is as a prospect? Do you see him as the future lightweight, or do you think he still has some improvements to make? Obviously, with the cardio, you said he worn down in the third round.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think he was like super gassed. I think I just taxed him because I was going for a lot of submissions, and some of them were very tight. I thought it was super impressive how he fought out of them.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no, I mean, it's so hard to say. I think that guy could be. He's 24 years old, I think, or he was. So
Yeah,
you could be, a future top five guy, and my buddy Salter would say it, and I kind of agree. I think the difference between top five and number one is just whoever wakes up feeling good that day. Um, but it's also about matchups. Like you could run into you see guys that get cut from the UFC in their three fights were like Taporia, another top 10 guy, another top five guy, and they just didn't know that's who those guys were going to be. So
yeah,
it really just depends. But I think on any day, he could hang with anybody in the top 15. Yeah, just from what I felt. It wasn't anything I've never felt before, but it also wasn't underwhelming. It wasn't like, oh, this guy's not very good. He was very good. It's like, you get UFC caliber opposition and you start to see that everybody's really good and some things are subtle differences. I think he was really good at putting the fight where he wants to be. And, he's so young, he'll develop in the other areas where, he could be a real threat here in a couple of years. I think his wins are like me, um, Rafael Alves, like very,
Alves. Yep.
yeah, guys that have wins in the UFC and are tough outs. So, super impressive thus far.
Do you feel like him fighting? I mean, because he doesn't fight that often. I don't even think he fought in 2024. I think he fought late 2023 and then fought you in 2025. Do you feel him like being so inconsistent could definitely kind of halt his momentum? Because the UFC may be like, man, we give you one fight and then you're gone for over a year. Like, why would we want to push you up the ladder if we don't even know how long until you fight again?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, there's two sides to look at it because I had some longer layoffs in my career that were out of my control, just like the matchmaker stuff. And when 10 months would go by and you're 27 years old,
Hmm.
That's enough time to be a whole different fighter when you come back because your skill development's so fast. So at 24, I don't know if there's a huge rush. Um, and I think they also need guys from his part of the world. I think he's from Tajikistan, so it's like there's not
Yeah.
many guys in the UFC or any. He might be the only one. Like I looked at his page before we fought just once, and I was like, this guy's like a celebrity in Tajikistan. He has like 600 or 700,000 followers. So like they do want to reach those demographics. I think it's good that they keep those guys around. So I think he may have a little more leeway. But I think he also had a surgery prior to our fight, so. I
Yeah.
think it's just one of those things where they like the young prospects. He's probably on a contender series contract, so there's not a whole lot of downside to having a guy like that and moving him along slowly. So I think he could really make some leaps and bounds here.
Yeah, I mean, why did you make the decision to retire after that fight? Because I mean, obviously your last two fights was Nerlio and then Grant Dawson, who's in the top 15. Like, what went into that decision?
Well, it was one of those things where it was more of a life decision than a fighting decision. Like I still love fighting. I mean, I'm in Virginia right now. I got two guys on my team that are fighting tomorrow, so I'm here coaching and helping with weight cuts and stuff. And
Hmm.
I love training hard. I train every single day, multiple times. So I'm really not that different. It was more of a life thing. It was more of not wanting to live in a cycle of like weeks all year long and not have an idea of when the next, paycheck is coming or when the next fight opportunity is going to come because the more and more the UFC, grows, the more the roster grows, the more beggars can't be choosers. You got to be ready to go at the drop of the hat. So,
Yep.
like my last fight was, kind of strung along over 20 weeks for like, hey, we'll call soon. Just be ready. It's very tough at the highest level to prepare like that. So we did it, and I was like, yeah, like, I don't think this is really how I want to spend all my time now. Like I have a family, and I have students at the gym that I work at and train at Gym O, and it's like I don't know that I can serve them well, constantly worried about my own needs and when a fight's going to pop up. And, and one of my rules of thumb was always kind of like if I lost three in a row, I would really reconsider where I was at in my career. And if the juice was worth the squeeze, like it's one of the best things I've ever done. It was so enjoyable. I loved every minute. But, when I look at the pros and cons, it was time to have like a logical conversation, not an emotional one, not being like, do I
Yep.
love this? Is it fun to walk out in front of a packed out crowd and fight your heart out? All those things are yes, but by those answers, I'll want to fight till I'm 75 years old if I'm
Yep.
alive, God willing. It's a matter of is it the right thing to do for myself, for my family, physically, all those things. And after talking with my wife, my coach, and a couple close people to me, it was like I don't think so. I think God was kind of telling me it was time to move on in my life. And it's been good ever since. Like I think I got to leave with a love of the sport that I can now pass on and teach. And
Yep.
we watch every card every weekend almost. Like I see a lot of guys stay around too long and they leave bitter. And I just never wanted to do
Yeah.
it. I love this so much. I love it since I'm a little boy. I don't want to stop loving it as a grown man. So it's been great. It was a tough decision, but it seemed pretty obvious by the end. Like I would feel like within an hour of the fight, when we were back at the hotel room, I had kind of already felt that on my heart, and then prayed about it, talked to my wife about it, and made a decision.
Would you ever maybe go do something like bare knuckle boxing, or is this probably it?
Definitely not bare knuckle.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not a big draw like that, right? I think I have like 10,000 followers, maybe. So it wouldn't be the biggest payday anyway. But like for me to do that, it had to be a life changing amount of money, like insane, like money that would never get paid to someone like me. Even then, like I jokingly talked about my wife just to see like, what's your number? She's like, there's no number. I would want you to do that. I want to do, I've been doing a lot of grappling.
Yep.
I would really love to get into the UFC BJJ. That would be. I was watching it last night, and I was like, man, like this is what I've been training. I'm teaching, I'm coaching, and then I'm training, doing my own training still full time in a lot of grappling. So
Hmm.
and jiu-jitsu. So I would love to go represent there and be one of the first UFC guys to be in UFC BJJ. I think that'd be really cool. That's what I spent my whole life doing before fighting. So and with the way it's growing and the exposure and the opportunity, I think it'd be really neat. So I'm trying to see what I would have to accomplish and who I would have to, get in touch with to make something like that happen. But I think that's a really good, you know, couple year goal, couple month goal, even maybe.
Yep. Would you do it at lightweight at 155, or you probably don't want to cut to 55?
No, definitely not. Yeah, I mean, I just watched two of my friends suffer, and I was like, man, like I don't even know how I did
What's your
55.
walker at weight?
It's probably a little closer to 170, 180 right
Oh,
now.
okay, okay,
So
okay.
probably that 170 division would be perfect. Like I
Yeah.
did Fury grappling, which is like on Fight Pass, and it's in Atlantic City, and I did that a couple weeks ago, and I cut to make 70. I think I cut 6 pounds. So it was enough to go. Oh, it was a little bit of a weight cut. It took an hour and 15 minutes, but not enough to be suffering on death's door. Like,
Yeah.
for that, for what 55 started to take the last couple of years, it would have to be like a full time job, like fighting was, and grappling's not that. So I think 70 would be ideal.
70. What are your thoughts on like the overall landscape of the UFC lightweight division compared to like the BJ Penn what's called era, the Khabib era? Because obviously you fought at lightweight in the UFC, so I'm sure you while you were active in the UFC, you were looking around like, all right, this guy might be next, and Nicholas Moda might be next, someone like that. And like, how do you think this generation stacks up the previous?
Yeah, it's really, it's interesting you say that because I always watched and I could never enjoy the 55 division because you're watching exactly how you just said. Like, well, this guy might be next, or I already fought Moda, or this guy, and there's always strings attached when you watch. You can't watch the clear heads, but actually, really, it's my favorite division to watch. And
Yeah.
now I can watch it as a fan, and really watch the growth. I think it's the best the division's ever been skill wise. But that BJ Penn era is always going to be a special time. I mean, when Frank Yeager was champion, that was a really special time, especially being from New Jersey. When Jim
Oh
Miller
yeah.
first came on the scene and was finishing guys and fighting on short notice, that's like as a fan, that's so nostalgic for me. That's my favorite. Joe Lozon is one of my all-time favorite fighters. That's a special time. But if you love the X's and O's of the sport, it's really hard not to think that right now is the best time to be a fan because everyone's just so good at everything.
Yeah, I mean, you just mentioned Jim Miller. You have a win over Jim Miller in the UFC. Is what does that mean to you to be able been able to beat such a legend like that?
Yeah, I think even more than that is to be I've been able to share the cage with someone that I was watching when I was a young kid and a fan
Yeah.
of, like that. It's a pretty surreal feeling to go like even the night before we even fought, like the night before the fight, you go, wow, like what all had to happen to get here, and that was pretty cool because it was
Hmm.
it was kind of symbolic of being a kid watching something and being a fan and really going on a journey of putting it into play. Like, I mean, it would be like someone playing, junior high football and watching, their favorite football player, and then they're catching a ball from them, 10 or 12 years later. It would be pretty wild.
Yeah.
That's exactly what happened. So, pretty neat, pretty scary because, like, one of the few guys I didn't really view as a peer because he's from generations before me, and I watched him, so I never saw him as like someone that I wouldn't be a fan of because I would never have to fight him in my mind, and then I had to fight him. So, kind of intimidating him walking out. But really cool, and I love watching him fight to this day, and pretty neat to have been able to share the cage with him.
What are your thoughts on him being still able to fight at a high level? Obviously, he's coming off a loss to Chase Hooper, but before he beat Damon Jackson by guillotine, I believe in round one. So like, what are your thoughts at his age still being able to submit and finish people?
Yeah, I think it's amazing. I mean, I was at that fight when he submitted Damon Jackson. It was awesome to see. He's just still game as ever and still as good at all the things he was always good at. He got great kicks, great elbows,
Yeah.
great left hand, and super dangerous submission game. So um, there's going to be guys that he matches up really well with. There's always going to be a bunch of those guys. There's going to be some that have a style to beat him, like Bobby Green but he's not slowed down, which is pretty cool. So I always thought that was kind of the route I would be because I love to train so much. I love to train hard. I don't take breaks.
Mhm.
Um, and it was crazy the shift that happened where like I really didn't want to do that anymore. But I have such admiration for someone going so long, so much because I just think it shows it's not an easy sport to be in forever. And for
Yeah.
how many generations he spanned is it's super impressive.
Yeah, and obviously we have a big lightweight title fight tomorrow in the main event. Elite Warrior versus Charles Oliveira. We also have another big lightweight fight, Moicano versus Dariush. What is your prediction for the main event tomorrow?
Oh man, I don't really know. I guess it's tough to pick against Charles. He's so good and he's so dominant
Yeah.
against everybody except Islam. But uh, I think between the power and the skill set that Topuria has and the ground ability, the defensive ground ability, especially like you know, Ryan Hall is probably as good of an MMA grappler as Oliveira, or a straight grappler at least, much better. So to go out there and negate all that and be one of the few guys to do it and have the ability he has on the feet. I think that would be my pick. I'm not super confident in it, but I would pick Taforia. And man, it's hard to pick against Dariush. I'm a huge Beneil Dariush fan, one of my all-time favorite fighters, and I do think he stacks up well with Moicano because I think he
Yeah.
has
I agree.
power and the grappling to nullify him and maybe out grapple him. So I'll pick Dariush on that.
Yeah, I know. I don't bet often. I just turned 18, so I've been illegally betting for a while. but now I can, now I can't get in trouble. But I was looking at the odds and I think Benil was like a slight underdog. I was like, dude, I think Benil's about to come out here and put a master class on Moicano. Because as you said, the grappling, the jiu-jitsu, I think is even. Wrestling, I think Benil kind of does have the advantage. And on the feet, Moicano has pop, but he doesn't have power. And we saw what Benio did to Gamrot. And Gamrot's got a pretty decent chin. How bad Benio dropped him in round 3 after already fighting for 10 minutes. So I think Benio could go out there and put on a masterclass.
I agree.
And then with the main event, Ilya Charles. I love Charles. I'm the biggest Charles Oliveira fan. I think Ilya's gonna come out here and sleep him.
Yeah, I think you might be right.
But yeah, I mean, as we talked about earlier, you just retired recently. When you look back to your career all the way through to your amateur days to your last fight, what do you think is your proudest moment of your career? And like, why when you look back on that memory, do you think it's the proudest one?
I used to think that it was like setting a goal and making it happen, and then that was when I first got there. And now the
Mm-hmm.
older I get, and the more I've been around stuff, and the more my faith grows, I go, that wasn't even so much had to happen for that to work out that I don't even know that I did that. Like I was a part of it for sure. I did the work, but a
Yeah,
lot of it was matchups and timing and the people I met, and it was really God's hand, right? So I don't know that I can be necessarily proud of getting there like that, but I do think um, I don't think I was very talented. I think I'm skilled because I learn well and I study and I put in a lot of hours. But I think through
mm-hmm.
hard work, I did more with less. Like I think there was a lot of guys, even that I know like regionally or locally that I started with or that were even a little ahead of me that I got a lot further than. And I do think a lot of that is just God's hand and being blessed. But I think a lot of it is also like really working hard and almost putting a square peg in a round hole. Like I never developed the slickest stand up that I wanted. I was always
Yeah,
tough enough and smart enough in training to end up outstriking really good guys, but it never is going to look like Tapor is, right? It's never going to look like you know Israel. Like
Bruce.
it's
Yeah,
never going to look like that. But I just was able to do more with less through toughness and IQ and hard work. So I am proud of that because I think a couple generations from now, guys like me won't even exist in the UFC. I think you're going to have a baseline athleticism that you have to have.
yeah,
That I'll look like a guy in a leather helmet from the NFL, like just so extinct. You're like that guy could never be in there now. And I think to be there now among some pretty great athletes was pretty cool. It was a great experience, and I think I'm proud of that. I worked hard, and I think I kept somewhat. I entered with a set of ideals and my faith and my marriage and all these things. And I'm like, man, like the most important thing is leaving with all these things just as good, if not better, as when I got here. Because there can be
yeah,
a lot of slimy stuff in this industry too, and I do think that definitely happens. So those two things I think are my proudest things.
yeah. I mean, when you started your career, was the goal to get to the UFC, or was it kind of like I'm gonna give it my all, and whatever happens, happens with this?
No, man, the day I put on a pair of gloves was to get to the UFC for sure. Like
Okay.
I was training jiu-jitsu, some stuff happened in life. I needed to make a living, and I was like, well, now's the time. Like now's the time. I've dreamt about this. Now's the time. So I took a fight 7 weeks later. I fought all my amateur fights in 1 year because we had to have 5 where I lived in South Carolina. Went pro in a year. I mean, I think in that first year and a half, I had 6 fights. Like I was fighting like a madman. So from the time I had my first amateur fight to the time I got signed to the UFC, I think it was like maybe like 3.5 years. Like it was
Oh
super
wow.
quick. Yeah. So I started fighting in 22. I was in the UFC by 25, almost 26, and then it was off to the races. Like there was no feeler. It was like as soon as I'm pretty certain I can't get there, I would stop. So
Hmm.
um, that's why it was pretty neat to set a goal and actually achieve it because it was like a direct like timeline. Like I think I even wrote in a notebook somewhere like in a big show by 25. And because back then, obviously Bellator was one of the big options too. So it was like a
Yeah.
big show that would pay me well and let me do this as a dream, and for a living. So I got to the UFC right before I turned 26. So it worked out. But now that I look at it, it was absolutely insane. And then
Yes, sir.
putting a lot of pressure on myself, but I think it all worked out. So
Yeah.
uh, it was a good time.
Do you remember what the emotions like when you first got the UFC contract? Whether it was a call or I believe you were on Contender Series.
Yeah, it
If
was
I'm not
Contender
mistaken.
Series. So it was a way more of a pressure cooker because you
Yep.
actually feel the emotion. It's not just a quick phone call or something like. It was a whole moment unto itself. Realistically, I wanted to be a champion. I wanted to be top 10, top 5, all those things. I'm happy with how it ended, but it could have ended right there. Like that
Hmm.
was if I look at my career, maybe one step further was the moment that I got in DC for my debut because it's close to my hometown. But man, like we got our that was my Rocky movie right there. Like I got there, tons of pressure, nothing really to go home to. You get the contract, you're on ESPN, they're showing my wife and our background and all these things. You're like, man, like I don't know that that moment will ever be topped. It's pretty neat.
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, we can wrap this up with one more question because obviously I know you have some fighters that you got to do for weigh-ins. Do you have a message for for all your fans and supporters that have followed you throughout your career, all the way to your amateur days to right now, and just like what can we expect from Joe Solecki in 2025 and the rest of the year?
Yeah, I mean, so I don't really know that I have fans. I think I always people would always say like, "Oh, my fans." I don't think I'm a big enough name to have that. I think it's pretty cool because through social media or through experience, I've just developed supporters. And really,
Yeah,
ultimately, those people are friends, right? So like, it's a community that I've been able to be a part of, which is pretty neat. So, thank you to everybody who's been a part of that and supported me, and actually care what the heck I was doing with my life and my career, and if they still do, that's pretty neat too. But yeah,
yeah,
I mean, I'm going to be at Gym O and teaching jiu-jitsu and helping guys with MMA and helping them, achieve their dreams, hopefully, and competing a lot in grappling and jiu-jitsu. So that's the goal. That's what I'm doing, and spending some you know my family is much deserving a lot of my time too. So
yeah,
spending some time with them in between that and during that, and they come to the gym too. They're part of it. My wife works at the gym. Like, it's been a really fun. It's been a fun decade, but this next era has been the best one I think so far. So it's fun to watch these guys have to go through what I went through, and then get to hopefully help them not make the same mistakes. Whether it's a weight
yes,
cut
sir.
trick, whether it's a mindset trick, a diet trick, or just falling for the same pitfalls that fighting can present. So it's been awesome, and yeah, it's been more of the same out of me. I think. I hope God willing.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Thank you for your time. I know you got fighters to take care of, so thank you for making 10, 15 minutes for this interview. I appreciate it, sir.
Oh man, thank you for having me. It's cool people still care. So thank you for having me. It's been great talking with you, buddy.
Yes, sir. Thank you,
All right,
everyone. That
take
was
care,
Joe
man.
Solecki. Yes, sir.
See you.
See you.